Hello, today I'm going to briefly discuss the different types of narrative genres: poetry, fantasy, legends, and dramas. Poetry is the literature used in many forms or structures. It's written to create a picture in your head, express your feelings, and to understand the true meaning of something. Some characteristics of it is it creates a mental visual in your head. While you're reading it, you should be thinking of the story that's going on so you can relate to it. It engages the reader or the listener in thinking, and most people write it to express their thoughts. 3 types of poetry are narrative, drama, and lyrical. I'll only be showing you examples of a narrative, which tells a story, and a dramatic, which is meant to be read out loud, because lyrical is mostly written for songs and would be similar to what you would hear on the radio. Also, poetry is not written like a book, page by page, but in a short passage. This is an example of a narrative poetry that tells you a story. So while I'm reading it, try to vision the story of Jimmy the ape in your head. It's called Jimmy Goes to the City by Arthur Reed. Jimmy was a happy ape until some hunters caught him. He liked the jungle better than the city where they brought him. The city was louder, the city was meaner, even the dirt in the jungle was cleaner. So Jimmy made a daring escape. The hunters were suddenly -1 ape. He climbed the tallest building because from there he'd see how far away the jungle was, from the middle of the city. Jimmy jumped into a passing plane, but the pilot didn't wait for him to explain. Jimmy flew back to the jungle and told his ape friends in their lair, "The city's okay for a visit, but you couldn't make me live there." So while I was reading that, you should have been listening to what was going on and thinking of Jimmy and all the things that he was going through. The next poetry is an example of a dramatic poem. It's called Ickle Me, Pickle Me, Tickle Me Too by Shel Silverstein. And this is an example that's definitely meant to be read out loud to make you guys respond to my voice, and you can hear the exclamation. And it goes, Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too, went for a ride in a flying shoe. Hooray, what fun, it's time we flew, said Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too. Ickle was captain and Piggle was crew, and Tickle served coffee and mulligan stew. As higher and higher and higher he flew, Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too. Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too, over the sun and beyond the blue. Hold on, stay, and I hope we do, cried Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too. Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too, never returned to the world they knew, and nobody knows what's happened to dear Ickle me, pickle me, tickle me too. So while I was reading that, you should have heard my voice change with the exclamation points and with the periods, and that's definitely one, like I said, that should be read out loud because you'll get a better understanding than if you were to read that in your head. And the next genre is fantasy. It's a fiction story that is an unrealistic magical adventure. And fiction, as we all know, means that it's written for pretend. The story would not be true. It's also written for make-believe, and they're enjoyable to read, but they also teach a life lesson. Some characteristics are it's highly imaginative, and magic plays a key role, as I said before. And the setting is an imaginary, enchanted, or otherworldly place. So fantasies aren't really what you're going to see day to day. They're more for joy to your mind. Some of the categories it falls under are a sword, myth/legend, time travel, or dark romantic fantasy. A sword is based around a world filled with fairies or dragons. That's definitely not true. You don't really see a dragon or a fairy outside your window. Myths and legends are historical stories about a hero. And time travel is exactly what it sounds like. The characters in the story are traveling through time to a new location. And then a darker romantic fantasy is just a romantic, it's fake, it's just a big, kind of like I Love Lucy. An example of a fantasy would be Charlotte's Web. Why is Charlotte's Web a fantasy? Well, it's actually a great example of one because Charlotte's Web is a story about a pig and a spider's friendship. The spider talks to Charlotte through spinning words in its web, and then as she goes on, she talks to Wilbur and just tries to be a friend and a motherly figure towards him as much as she can. And as we all know that spiders and pigs cannot talk, let alone spell words. So this would portray a fantasy story in a lot of ways. Moving on to the genre of legends, I briefly mentioned this earlier, that it's a historical story about a hero, person, or phenomenon. Legends are written to present kids like yourself models of behavior, and it also explains characteristics of life, culture, and historical events. It's based on bravery, strength, kindness, and sacrificing. And the setting would be regional, national, or international geographic settings. Legends can also be fiction or nonfiction. The example I'm going to show you is fictional, so it can be regional, national, or international. Just keep in mind that sometimes it's not real. One characteristic is it has a traditional story pattern, which traditional would mean that it's real. Good triumphs evil. There's going to be a good guy versus a bad guy, and the good guy will come out on top winning. And challenges overcome by tests or struggle is when the hero is presented with a challenge, he tries his hardest to win it. And it's set in a time period more recent than a myth. So a good story that would portray a man of kindness, bravery, and models good behavior is Spider-Man. He is bitten by a spider that gives him superpowers that he uses to protect his city. This would be a legend because it's a story of a hero that is showing people that good people do good things, and Spider-Man will always be remembered and modeled after by his courage. And there's a lot of examples of legends, but I think you can relate to Spider-Man more directly. And then the last genre is drama. It's literature written for performance. It's written to entertain, reflect on life, enlighten, or inform. You can watch drama on television shows, movies, or plays. You can also read drama in books or act out a drama for something like a school play. Basically, you can turn anything into a drama because mostly everything we watch or read is for entertainment. You can also portray dramas through scripts, dramatic monologue, stage, scenery, sound effects and lighting, and narrative structure, anything that's going to make your audience more entertained. And it might be more familiar to think of your favorite TV show or your favorite movie so you can understand more of what's going to be entertaining to yourself. An example of a drama would be, you basically can use any movie, book, or show that I mentioned before to give an example of a drama. But I thought the movie The Polar Express has a lot of drama in it because a little boy is on his journey to the North Pole, and a bunch of magical things happen to him, making this story more relatable and more exciting. And yes, he does have mystical powers on his sleigh and everything, and Santa Claus. But dramas also can be fictional or nonfiction. It just depends on what you want to look at or how you want to relate to it. Then here's a citation page, and overall, you should have a general overview of a few types of narrative genres and should be able to recognize these throughout your readings. When you're reading a story of Charlotte's Web, you should be able to say that, this is unrealistic, it's magical. When you read Spider-Man, you should understand that he's a hero and that it's a legend. And then as you're reading through poetries, you should be able to tell if it's telling a story, if it's a song, is it dramatic, and then be able to tie all these things in together. And if you're watching a drama or reading a drama, you should be able to identify with that also. So I hope you take all this with you and are able to have a better understanding of everything. All right, thank you.